Hey, and welcome to another episode of Creative Leaders Unplugged, a podcast brought to you by Future Skills Academy. I'm Morgan with Arna, and today
Me?
we're talking to Tiz Creel. She is an what does she call herself? A maker.
Artist. She's an artist.
She's an artist.
Yeah.
But she's a
Struggling with the
maker,
words, though. Sorry, what?
a questioning artist, a
Of
maker,
course.
a breaker, an undisciplined artist.
Yeah. A breaker, and someone who questions everything, trying to find her way. Very interesting because of that. Yeah, I want to say struggle. I'm not sure if it's a struggle, but there is a struggle there in the sense of where do I belong? What is it what am I?
Mhm.
I'm an artist. I've always considered myself an artist, but I don't like the world of art. I don't like the way artist is being seen, or the way it's kind of so elitist. And that, which to me basically is a true artist. That's what an artist should do: question those things. So
Yeah.
there's an interesting paradox there, where she actually wants to distance herself from the world of art, but by doing that, to me, she's a real artist,
For
because
her
that's what you're supposed to be doing.
title. Yeah.
And also, she starts saying, I'm a maker, I'm a breaker, and that's exactly what she's doing. So it
Mhm.
gave me a lot of inspiration and energy, and I'm like, I want to be an artist now too.
I have four
I go,
post-its full of inspiration from this convo. So
yeah, no, I really love the way she also was able to articulate things really. I mean,
yeah.
she's very smart,
Mhm.
and she really thought about this. And she wrote this article. We're going to share that also, alongside
Yes.
this
Yeah. It's very
podcast.
philosophical also in a way. And I hope for me, I mean, I've spent time studying the difference between art and design. There were also some points and I was like, oh, I hadn't considered that angle of it before. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
she lives it. She's in this, and that's the other feeling I got. She's in, like, in the middle of it, right? It's not just a reflecting on it, like in hindsight. No, it's like she's
Mhm.
right there now. And
Yeah.
right, so you felt the sort of the passion, but also the frustration, and also the sort of the yeah, trying to find meaning in it, and looking at what can we do? Should we do something? No, yes. Like,
Yeah.
we have to break this thing, and but is it our role to do it? And no, it really got me, yeah, really excited. So
Yeah. And I knew Tiz from before. And she's somebody who every time I talk that we have a conversation, it just has me looking at things in new ways. And I think that's such an incredible skill to have. That's
yeah,
something that an everyday thing, art, right? Like, oh, art, you automatically know. No, you don't automatically know what that means, especially after this
yeah.
conversation. So,
Yeah, words.
yeah,
Words, yeah. And if you turn it upside down and you look at it from a different angle, you go like, what exactly does it mean?
yeah,
Isn't it all the same? And why do we have these words and these boxes that we kind of assign people to, and how, because yeah, exactly. So I love that. And that, so exactly what she said, that she was a maker and a breaker. That is what she did.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Enjoy, be inspired.
I think I am a lot of things. I am a creative, I'm a maker, I'm a breaker. I live by imagination. I'm an undisciplined artist. I would say that's because I never settled in a medium or a conceptual frameworks. And I was told many, many times to focus on something as an artist. And that's kind of the way to success. Then for the good, the bad, and the worst, I chose not to define it as my practice. And I just started a studio, which is a experiential design and play studio. And we essentially create experiences and resources to challenge, inform, or inspire people in different subjects.
So my first, when you started saying you're a maker and a breaker, so my question is, what do you break?
Well, I guess sometimes to make you have to break. You know, when you have something that it's already done, it's already in its final form, sometimes you have to break it to make it evolve, if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
it's like opening a fridge, you know, and see what's the inner connections and how it works, or it's a bit of the same principle. Sometimes to find out novel things or to experiment, you have to break things. You have to open things up, metaphorically or physically.
Yeah, for sure. It reminds me a little bit of when I was a kid. By the way, my parents had these older radios in the, and it's so beautiful. I think it was from their parents, or my great grandparents or something. I don't know if they were valuable or anything, but at one point I was so curious about what was inside of these things. So I did kind of pull them apart. And the problem is I couldn't get them back together again. That's sort of the only downside of this story, is like I wasn't able to actually get it. But it did kind of, but it is about that curiosity and imagination. And at the same time, to your point, um, you know, if you break something, so I think to me, creativity is about creating new connections. Creativity is about not coming up with new things. Nothing's ever new, but it's new connections, right? So you put it back together again in a different way. You go like, huh, but it creates a different meaning, but the thing is the same. And I think I saw something that you created somewhere online, and it was one of those, how do you call those little um, castles made of, can you kind of
A
these
bouncy castle
bouncing castle? Is that the name?
or an
Yeah.
inflatable.
Inflatable, yeah, right. So something that typically my when my kids were still smaller, they would kind of play in these kind of inflatable castles thingies, right? Just you kind of jump it down. So is that something, as an example, that what you were talking about, that you, because it's, yeah, can you talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah,
Because it's interested in
absolutely.
me because of the visual of it, and also it was taken out of context, because you go like, oh, that's for kids. Oh no, it's not for kids. Is it for kids? Oh, maybe it is. I don't know.
You know, I like to break those barriers to who are these things for. No, these things are for whoever wants to experience them, and that's a way that I try to manage my work. But it's true that sometimes, and I have noticed this over and over again, when there is something that is interactive in any kind of context, if a child or children or a young person is using it, playing it, or doing whatnot in that space, the adults will never engage. But if the kids are not in the space, they can engage. It's an interesting behavioral thing that I have noticed throughout time, that adults immediately think, oh, if a child is using it, then it's not for me. And it has happened many times with my work, but also I have noticed that in any cultural space where there's interactive experiences and whatnot. That's a side note about the bouncy castle. It was a project that I made in 2019, I believe. And I wanted to design a structure that it was fully immersive. When you go inside, there's no way out somehow, no? And I thought about many formats that I could take, but also in the part of creating it a way that something that I could reuse, that I could recycle. So there were a lot of things that played a part on why I chose that to be an inflatable. But it came to be, and the whole plan was to design a bouncy castle that it's made for you to fall down. No, so there's holes on the ground. The stairs are very narrow, so when you try to climb them, you immediately slip down. And there's a series of details that we included on that structure. And the idea was exactly that. No, I want adults to go in and try to behave like adults normally, and being unable to, because they go in the hole, they cannot climb, they cannot do anything. So either or you let yourself down and just stay where you are, completely immobile, or you actually move and engage and play. So it was a way to force people a little bit to play. I didn't tell them, of course, that it was designed for that. It was more about like go in and you make your own stories there. And then I have used the structure to create other experiences as the anchor or the hook, perhaps to create stories, for example. In the creative sense or the learning or the academic environment, sometimes I've done different explorations, and yeah, you can always use these assets, these pieces, as a way to start conversations.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when you say you're a breaker, this is a great example of how you also break sort of you break up sort of the normal way of behaving. You force people into a sort of a behavior that that they don't choose, but they have to because they're in your design. So it's really it's an interesting way of thinking about it, because I think breaking things is also seen as making a mistake, right? So it's not supposed to happen, it's supposed to break things. But actually, to your point, if you can't break them,
Do
you'll
it.
never, yeah, you can never come up with anything new, right?
And
So
some things have to be broken. There's many systems and many conceptions or concessions, social concessions in which we operate every day that maybe we do need to break. We cannot really build upon them anymore. Things that could be damaging to others or to certain groups and communities,
Mhm.
the environment, you call it. No, there's many things that as society we need to break in our
well,
behavior and the things that we do. And
yeah, but is
it
it
could be
also
the
not
beginning.
an intervention into to understand things better? If an intervention is also, in a way, your bouncy castle is also an intervention where all of a sudden all the rules don't apply the normal way of you would, the way you should behave or want to behave, and all of a sudden, but it does kind of unearth basically all the whatever the norms are, what normal is, and because it's this great intervention. So I think that in a way that turns it into art as well, because to me great artists are artists, and art is all about intervention, where you go like, that makes me uncomfortable, or makes me think, or is a comment on something, or it breaks, to your point, it breaks a pattern, and it's an intervention into something, which is so, I don't know that. So sorry, I'm gonna, like, because I love that word breaking,
Yeah.
because we feel so awkward about that, when actually there is, to your point, there is no other way.
Yeah. And you called yourself an undisciplined artist in the beginning. And
That's right.
so I think that's really fabulous, because that's always a bit the narrative, right? Oh, you're an artist. Okay, what's your medium? What's your specialty? What's your? And so for yourself, as you've chosen to explore different mediums and doing things, do you find that there's a red thread through what you're doing, even though it's in different, formats?
Yeah, I mean, there might be a few things that could be a common thread, but I always say if I have to choose a medium, it would be play,
Mm.
which makes it even more difficult, probably. Uh, but yeah, throughout the years, I have explored so many different mediums. I started painting, but throughout, I've done sculpture, digital arts. I have worked with machine learning. I have worked with resins, with metal, with wood, with textiles. And the nature of my work really has more to do with what it is or what is meant to be, more than I'll translate whatever it is to the medium that I know or I have mastered. No, and that brings very positive things or a lot of value, but it also has a downside, and it becomes very difficult to be or exist as an artist when you don't really have any definition, or to find opportunities, or to just get seen. So there is a part, and it's funny because the arts and art is supposed to break boundaries and is supposed to be always at the forefront of the revolutionary ideas and transformational processes and whatnot. And it doesn't really feel like it does that, or at least it doesn't anymore. And the meaning of art, which is very, very interesting, because you said, well, for me, art for me means this, no? And it's funny because it is for you. There is no definition of art that everyone can agree with, or that really encompasses what art is or what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
So it is a very interesting subject. In the end, it has to do more with the context. I feel art means different things in different times for different people in different places, and depending on where you are is basically temporal and contextual.
Yeah, and it's in the eye of the beholder.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, and so Morgan and I, we actually had, we had lots of conversations around, and we also had a podcast about this, about, art, art, being an artist or a designer, or what's the difference, and when can you actually say about yourself that you're an artist, because it almost sounds like a lofty thing, like I am an artist, when actually most artists, it's nothing lofty about it, because they're just, they can't even make a living because through their art. So there's nothing lofty about it, but somehow there's something when you say I'm an artist, there's,
I think there's something very brave about it, right? Because it's such a risk, right? Because it can mean so many different things to so many different people. Because I might see one thing in this painting and you might see the complete opposite. I think it's really
it's brave because it's vulnerable and it's scary, and it's because you create something. To your point is that you see something and you create something with an intention, and then other people can go like, nah, yeah. But it's because people, when you're creative and an artist specifically, you create something from your own mind, and that's very close to your heart. That's very vulnerable too. So you have to be really brave to show it to people, because people can go like, nah, that's really terrible. Like, oh, that's my personal also feeling, like, so as a creative and also as an artist, which for me, that's always been such a scary thing. And when I work with designers also, there's this vulnerability there. They want to be liked, they want to be kind of seen as professionals and as doing their craft really well, and at the same time, and this is all inside their own heads without anybody else's judgment. Even before that happens, they're inside of them, they're full of doubts and thoughts, and like, is this good enough, is this okay, comparing themselves to others. So being yourself and saying, no, this is what I want, and making your own choices. And I think that's what you're kind of describing, that people say, no, you have to focus. If you don't focus, you're never going to be successful. You're like, that's not me.
And it's true.
Well, it's
I'm bear witness of that. There is a lot of rejection to different things within the art sector, I think. But there might be many things at play that is why that happens.
But are you an artist or a designer? Sorry, you have to finish that sentence.
I wrote an article we can share later on. It's called The Art Conundrum, and I talk about the art world. I talk about what it means or what it is to be an artist today, and a little bit on the philosophical side of the meaning and the purpose of art today, or to redefine, an invitation to redefine what art is in somehow. So I'll share it to you, and you might read it and you tell me what you think. But it is really a dilemma, no? There's a lot of incongruencies and oppositions with what art is, or what it can do and what is not. No, anyone can be an artist, or artist is the sole genius, no? And there's a lot of dichotomies that rise within when you question yourself what art is and what is it for, and you realize how there is no agreement into what that is. Maybe there was agreements in different agreements throughout time of what art was. No, for the Greeks, it was something more technical, for example, like a technical ability. At some point, it was more about aesthetics, and another point, it was more about a form of communication. But if you think about today, what is the purpose of art today? What is the influence today of art? And it really, you get to a point where you think, does it have any influence in society nowadays? Because you think about who are the cultural makers, or who are the people who are, let's say, winning the cultural wars today, and you look at, you know, pop stars, you look at reality show stars, you look at other people, but really, where are the artists today? And where is the influence? Where is the value of what artists do for society? It seems to me that at some point the art world enclosed on itself,
Mhm.
and it
Good
became
point.
somehow of a bubble. No, so there sometimes you do have to question the structure that is behind it. That is also about something about breaking. No, because artist and art is always going to exist with or without the industry. And there's always going to be people who are making things and who are creating new things and making aesthetic creations, or being amazing in a technical ability, or create new forms of communicating that are novel. There's always going to be people like that. There's always going to be creatives in the world. No, but art, it's an interesting question to say if art has any purpose today, any function,
So interesting.
or if should it
Yeah.
have a function.
Yeah. And I watched kind of a cultural side tangent, but connected. I watched, so last night was a Super Bowl, which for those not as familiar with American football is the moment for the biggest TV advertisements of the year. So people are paying millions upon millions of dollars to have 60 seconds of airtime, because they know that a large majority of people in the United States are watching television during the Super Bowl. Of course, I watched the Super Bowl commercials today during lunch to catch up and see, okay, what were the big commercials?
So did you watch the Super Bowl?
No, just the
You just
commercials.
watched the commercials? Okay, sorry. Here you go.
You just went to watch Taylor Swift. I know it.
We'll talk about that later. But the commercials were so yeah, it was really interesting because I remember growing up watching the commercials, and they would, and of course I was 5 or 7 or 8, so my judgment was a bit different, but you read them as one thing, and now it's become something completely different, and it's really about who's the biggest celebrity we can pull into these 60 seconds so they can hold our product in their hand and say, buy this. And it was missing so many of the commercials that I watched where there was no art to it. And it made it, but then there were a few that really stood out, and you could feel the difference. And it just really blew my mind that so much effort is going into, you have the attention of a large segment of the nation, and you not even using it to the biggest potential that it had. And it was really surprising to me. This is a tangent.
We live in the influencers. No, but it's the influencers economy we live in, which I think is not. I mean, and I don't know this. Obviously, I didn't do any research in this, but I've been reading up on this, and it a lot of the influence of influencers is actually not that big at all. So they don't really have that much influence. Basically, influencers are people who connect themselves to a product that is already starting to become popular, but it's popularized in networks, in communities and networks, and not through influencers. But they basically can give it a little bit of a push.
Sure.
But we have this belief that we need these big names and these famous people and these kind of voices to be heard. Yeah, but it's fascinating. What I mean, the question is, what is art? I mean, art is there art involved? There are designers involved, right, in all these programs and all these things, and designers and design is everywhere. Everything is designed in a way by people, it's created. So it's interesting. So that's what I wanted to ask you that question, because we've been kind of struggling with this kind of question a little bit. I mean, I think we have an answer for it, but not really sure where the boundaries are. But are you a designer or are you an artist? And where is that kind of, where does it kind of overlap? Or
During my entire life, I have considered myself an artist. And recently, a few years back, I started calling myself a designer as well. And I use them sometimes one, sometimes the other, depending on the context, because I find that sometimes I need to help people to define myself. So if I say too many things, it might just like, okay, I'm a designer, or okay, I'm an artist. And it makes it a bit easier for me to mutate because I use both tools. I use design to make art, and
yeah,
I can make art out of design sometimes as well. And it really depends, no? But when I am doing something that has a function, and that function is more important than anything else, then I consider that I am designing. So for example, in the bouncy castle, that was a work of art. I think that what I did the most was to design. And I had to, because those kind of structures could be very, very dangerous, and people can get hurt or people can die, you know, and there has been
right.
many accidents throughout the history of bouncy castles where people
Really?
have
I never
died.
thought
Yeah.
about that. They died in bouncy castles.
It's a dark
Yeah.
history,
That's
Arna.
such an
Yeah.
awkward death.
Yeah.
It's a
Wow.
very bizarre thing, but
I never
because they're
knew that.
inflatable structures, there's many things that can happen, no? But one of them, it can be that if you don't attach it properly to the ground, or you don't put enough weights, and a good wind comes, as you know, that you're in the
Right.
Netherlands,
Yeah.
it can take it and it can lift it up for
Your
many, many
castle in
meters.
the
And that
air.
has happened already multiple
Okay,
times. And
that's
there's a
very
big
scary.
famous case, yeah, of an artist's work, actually, that it was an inflatable. It wasn't a bouncy castle because you entered to a space, but the space was, you were not lifted from the ground. And they didn't attach it properly. It was in a field in the UK. And then it lifted up and it injured, I don't know how many people, and two
Oh,
people
really?
died. It was
Whoa.
it was a shocking case, but yeah, they're surprisingly dangerous. And of course, I didn't knew that when I decided to do the project, because I never think about like the little nitty-gritties. I think, okay, this has to be a bouncy castle, and I decided on it, and this is what it's going to be. And then you figure out those little details. But the more you dig into the subject, you actually realize how complicated it is. I needed permissions. I needed to test the materials, like fire testing, and I have to have, every year I have to test them. I have to get insurance. If, for example, a child cannot go inside with an adult, because if they're jumping and they crash, they can injure, the child can get injured, or they can go out flying. There's so many little details that you
These are
would
very
never imagine.
dangerous contraptions. I'm so happy my kids survived because
Dark
they've been
side.
in many of them. But
No,
yeah,
it's fine. The people who run them, they know what they're doing because they have to be certified.
yeah. But then again, I mean, is that part of design? Or is that just part of? I mean, that sounds like you need some engineering.
Absolutely.
Right,
And
so that's an engineer that goes into the like the details of or it's of the safety and the materials and of course there's design there too, but
But
also there are sorry, yeah,
well, because I teach, industrial design engineering. So we're also playing a lot with the difference between design and engineering. And you mentioned in your bouncy castle Tiz that you had like a very narrow staircase that would cause them to move their body, maybe like be hunched over or something, right?
yeah, well, the stairs particularly, they will make you fall, because as soon as you step on them, they're so narrow that, and because it's an inflatable structure, it's not completely solid. So there's almost no way. There is like techniques that you can develop, of course,
Yeah.
but essentially there is no way that you can just completely put all your weight on one of the steps. So eventually you kind of go down. Of course, it's possible, and people do whatever they can to climb the stairs, and they do, but yeah, it was a conscious decision.
Yeah, and this to me sounds like, especially with these stairs, and that's just one small part of the whole project, you know? Like that there would be, okay, design, let's have them, and kind of the art, right? Like we're gonna have them kind of struggle on the staircase, and then the engineering, how do I actually not manufacture, but how do I build this and bring this to life? And
Yeah. Well, for me, art, and I can start with defining what I think, or what art is to me. No, so to me is the ability to ideate beyond what is presented. No, so let's say that you're a shoemaker
Mhm.
and you're always every day making the same shoes according to these patterns, and that's what you do. And then one day you decide to do something different, to improve it, to experiment with it, to learn from it, to make it unusable. It doesn't really matter what you do, but that intuition
Mhm.
to me is what makes the artist. No, so is to imagine something that doesn't exist, to create something that doesn't exist, or to even envision it. Sometimes you don't have to create it. It could be a story that would never occur.
Mm.
uh, and I guess an artist would be someone that lives by that intuition, but that intuition perhaps could come to anyone at any time,
Mhm.
if
Yeah.
that makes any sense. But
I
this is a personal perspective of what I
Mhm.
consider what art is to me. No, so I
Yeah.
have stripping a little bit the quality of genius or the quality of master that artists always have, and I just
Mm.
put them in a place of saying, like, just think outside the box, and that should be enough.
So
Just try.
so if you would have asked, so I'm just going with this kind of theme a little bit. So if you would have asked someone like Leonardo da Vinci, are you a designer, an artist, an engineer, a scientist? Choose which one. Which one are you? Architect? What
I
are
would
you?
say an artist because of all of those things.
Yeah, but I think somehow we at that time when he was that there was no that had no meaning. There was so artist maybe, but designer the whole concept of a designer wasn't there yet. And so and being an engineer and being sort of scientists
Mhm.
in that sense, breaking things and putting them back together again, and imagining things that are not there, and then trying to make them come alive, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's a very, and, maybe you know more about this, and maybe someone who's listening knows more about this, and please do kind of correct me if I'm wrong. But I think that is quite a current modern way, and I'm saying modern in a kind of broad sense of the word, like maybe the last 100 years, 200 years, that we started to see sort of designers as a bubble, and artists as a bubble, and engineers as a bubble, and science as a bubble,
Yeah.
because basically the way we think about things and solve problems is the same. The reason why we are doing it might be different. So an artist might just do things because the artist has this urge to do something, but there's no client saying, we want you to create this thing, right? And we're going to pay you for it, and it has to look a little bit like this or something. There's commission art. I mean, obviously. So there's kind of, it's not a, I don't think these bubbles are something real. I think a lot of people like yourself, I think a lot of people
We don't fit
are,
anywhere.
no, because you go like, they gave us these boxes, but I don't fit in any of these boxes. And if you're smart, you're going to say, well, so this is really interesting. And I've been doing this all of my life. I think, it's, when it makes sense to say you're a designer, you're a designer. If it makes sense that you're an artist, I'm an artist. If it makes sense that I'm a consultant, I'll be a consultant.
It's just a word. Really,
It's
it's
just a
just a
word.
word.
It's a word. It makes you comfortable. All right, fine. I'm that, but I'm using the same tools. I'm
Mhm.
using the same, things that I know and I've experienced and have talent for, to come up with solutions for you. And I think,
But I do think that there's a bit of a difference between design and art. Maybe it wasn't before, and now it is. I always thought about design, as I said before, like with a function, no, and it has to always comply to that function. first. No, if you're making a building, you have to make sure that the building is safe, that it's
Mhm.
going to last, that it has all the appliances and everything that it needs in that sense. No, if you're making a chair, you have to make sure that it functions as a chair, that you can sit on it. And then you can experiment with that. And then after the function is covered, you can experiment with the aesthetics, with the materials, with the design itself, and try to push the boundaries of the design. But art doesn't have those boundaries, or is not supposed to have those boundaries, or it never has those boundaries.
But
So
what you're talking
even if,
about is a crafts person. That's craft.
but
Where's
a
the
craft can have boundaries, because if you're making a glass out of ceramic,
yeah.
you still need to cover that function.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, if your craft is a furniture maker,
Mhm.
right? I mean, do you call are you a designer?
Do
Ooh.
you
You
did
know,
you make it, or you're just replicating it? Because maybe you are,
wow.
not everybody's a creator. No, some people just want to be told what to do, and they just want to go in and do it and then go off. Not everybody has that intuition of, I want to see what's beyond this furniture piece. Eh, and that urge, just
Okay.
some people have it, and it's good for the balance of the world community too. That we have people that also just want to say, I don't want to think, just tell me
You
what
just
to do and I'll do it, and that's it.
it's good to have those people. Like, just do it. All right, fine. Just tell me
As
what to do,
someone who,
please.
yeah, as someone who fails to like finish things perfectly or be able to bring out the polish, when I was able to come in with the plan and share this with my classmates or my colleagues who are more of the, yeah, I don't know, the crafts people, if you will, they were able to say, okay, we see what she wants to do, let's do it. And I would not be able to survive or function without these people.
Hmm.
I have more of the ideas, but I struggle with all of the fine little details, but they know their craft, or they know the material that they're working with so well, they're able to bring that together for me.
Exactly. When someone masters a craft, that's when it becomes art, supposedly. No, it's not just knowing how to paint, really, because nowadays anyone can paint with a YouTube tutorial. But it's
Mhm.
about what you do with that technique and how you master that technique. And that's why we used to call artists masters, because they used to do
Yeah,
unique things.
exactly.
No, certain painters used to revolutionize the ways we understand painting, and that's why they get that name.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but nowadays is not really like that, and from a very long time, it hasn't been like that. Contemporary art is not about technical skill or technical ability at all. In
Mhm.
fact, a lot of artists don't even know how to draw properly in
Mm.
terms of proportions, light, and
Mhm.
form. Not necessarily caricatures or whatnot, or having like a distinctive style, but actually be able to copy reality, which is one of the most important skills for an artist, because when you know how to make an interpretation of the world as it is, then it's
Mhm.
easier to break.
Then you can break. Yeah. So I
Exactly.
grew up in a family of artists, and I had a grandfather. My grandfather, my mother, my mother's side of the family they're all artists, and so my grandfather was quite a successful artist, quite well known in his time. So he and I this kind of somehow parts of me that ruined parts of me or my brain as an artist, because he would say, to your point, um and if you can't have if you don't know the craft, if you can't draw, you can go like do abstract painting, but it's meaningless because they can't draw. And so he would kind of judge artists, very famous artists, based on the fact that when he saw their drawings, like they can't really draw, so they don't have the craft, so they can't really be meaningful at all in their art. Okay, so now so that has ruined part of my brain, because for a long time I would for instance, I would really not like Van Gogh, because Van Gogh, to be honest, is not a really good artist in the sense of real artists being, these craftspeople. And there's this was a wonderful television program about recreating one of his pieces of art, and underneath his a famous painting, a self-portrait, I think, was a painting that he painted over it, and
Mhm.
it was a model sort of a session with a model when he was at the academy in Antwerp, and they wanted to recreate the painting perfectly. So they also wanted to kind of have first the painting underneath the painting. So the artist that was recreating the painting wanted to first draw that one and then do the famous one on top of it. By the way, as an artist, if you paint over, it might be because you don't have any money for the canvas, but maybe you were really embarrassed with, so don't do that. So they went to the academy because they thought, well, that was when he was in the academy and there's this model. So other artists would have been doing the same kind of model at the same time, in the same sitting. So they went to the academy to see whether there were other paintings and, from that same model, same sitting, and and the work. And they were amazing. They were like photographs. They were so beautiful. So, and the one thing Van Gogh made was, no, there's like a cartoonish kind of, no, it wasn't really good. He was kicked out of the academy also, partly because of that, because they were like, he has no talent. Okay. But then what I also discovered later is that because maybe he didn't have the ability to make these kind of photographic, beautiful, lifelike images, but he had a passion. He just went, and because of his inability, he discovered something new. He didn't do the perfect thing. He went beyond that because he had to kind of invent something else to express himself, and he couldn't do it sort of the classical way. It's my interpretation, by the way, of history. Sorry if anybody is listening. This is my interpretation. Because then they were like, actually, I love how people who struggle, who are maybe not the kind of the picture perfect, who are not the ones that go like, yeah, you're like, exactly, you're so talented, and somehow create something that is so uniquely their own because they chose the difficult path and they couldn't do what the others did, and they, so because I'm a little bit of a misfit myself. He's like, so did he, is that true? And Picasso, to be honest, he's not a really good, if you look at his drawings, I know people who can do that way better.
Yeah.
I-
And there's a lot of, I mean, if we go down, Van Gogh is a special case, I would say, no, but there is reasons why also the artists got picked as to be the talented ones. There were many artists in that time, and there's something about reputation. There's something about relationships, and
Sure.
as it always has been, because art, especially and specifically because it doesn't have a performance measurement like any other thing, like design, for example. It does have a performance measurement that would be the function, I suppose.
Good point.
Yeah.
So how do you even say what is art, what is not art? You can tell throughout history certain moments of revolution within art, but which artists got to become famous, that's someone's choice.
Well, totally. And hey, Van Gogh never was successful. I mean,
Van Gogh is a special case, I would say, because he truly, he had a different path than most of all other artists that become famous, even when they're there. And it's because they're tagged along with this group of people, the network, that the correct network to be pushed in that direction, no? And luck could also play an important role, but Van Gogh did never really go through that. So it's an interesting case. But also he was an interesting character on its own.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, if you look at all, I mean, especially famous artists or any artist really, if you look at their lives, it's full of, happy accidents or bad accidents, or like, why is that, artist so famous and that one is not so famous? And if you look at their work, and they were also, just human beings, and especially in the time of Van Gogh, or like in the time of Rembrandt, for instance, is really fascinating, where basically he has a studio. In a way, he's, it's like a design studio. He has all his apprentices who kind of paint
Yeah,
with
they
him.
make the paintings and then he goes and
Yeah, it's
signs them.
so I mean, yeah, which makes sense because it's just it's a job, it's a studio, and it's like now you go to you have your photograph taken, and then you had your photograph painted, and so my point is a little bit like there's so much we put things in these bubbles, in these boxes, and we say no, this is art, and no, this is how an artist should be, or no, this is what is meaningful, or and we're always looking for that, and I don't mind looking for it, but I to your point earlier about the art world being sort of a bubble, and actually being very traditional, I think, and very not very flexible, and not very to me, every time I kind of bump into the art world here in the Netherlands, I go like, huh, this is really weird, because they act as, I don't know, they're not very open at all. First of all, you need a diploma, otherwise you can't be an artist. So you can't kind of join an exhibition here in my town, for instance. There's some exhibitions that are really nice, but the only artists that are allowed to show their work are people with a diploma. So you go like, really? That's interesting. At the same time, I understand it, because these are working artists, they have to make a living, so they kind of need to kind of protect the market a little bit. But it's fascinating how that kind of yeah, I don't know. I
Did
have
you?
another question. I have a totally different question, because I want to know, when did you start calling yourself an artist? What is the moment in life where you felt that you wanted to be an artist, or did you start
Yeah.
as
And that
when?
tags on with my question is, did you always want to be an artist as well? So,
Absolutely. I don't know when I wouldn't be able to pinpoint exactly when I decided, oh, I'm an artist. No, but since I was very young, there were always artistic tendencies, and from the very beginning, I started doing little things. Like I created with my mom's recorder that she used to go to take classes. She used to take our class and record the classes, and I used to take that, and I did a radio show with a friend. I didn't even remember that. She told me a few days ago that when we did it, and I remember now. I used to do little short films in school, uh, all sorts of different things, and I have always had that intuition to create,
mhm.
or to do something. Maybe it has to do with ADHD that I have, which I didn't knew at the time. So I would find that out many years later. But at that point, I always needed to constantly be stimulating myself, and this is the way that I found how to do it somehow.
And
No, and how I started it per se. It was because I was a bit of a troublemaker, probably for the same reasons. I was doing bad at school in terms of grades and behavior. And at some point, they sent me to therapy. And in therapy, I always used to draw and doodle and do little things, or just scribble. And all the time, every single minute that I spend in therapy, I used to do that. So my therapist recommended me with a painter, so I could learn. And that was the guy Javier Gomez Soto, who showed me everything I know about these classical forms of painting or
Oh,
understanding
wow.
art. So I came to his studio the first day, and I thought I was going to paint right away, and he was going to take out all the oil paints, and it was going to be fun. And he just gave me a pencil and a piece of paper, put an apple in front of me, and he said, until you know how to draw that apple perfectly, you will not paint.
oh,
And so it happened. It took me, I don't know how much, perhaps like a year or something, to master pencil, so I can move to carbon and then to oil at some point.
Oh, this is
Uh,
my grandfather.
I think it's important, but going
Yeah,
back
it
about the
is.
skill, if you're a film artist that does filmmaking, maybe you don't need to draw, no? So the
Mm,
problem nowadays is that the lack of definition of art, or the lack of understanding or agreement on what art is and what it's supposed to do,
mm,
it's a good thing, because it allows anything to be art and anything to be explored or to be redefined and whatnot. But at the same time, it kills it, in the sense that by not defining it,
Mm.
we stop understanding it.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there is a lot of conversations that we can start, and I've been trying to start them, to say, should we define something? Should we, it's not about limiting the concept, but it's about having a purpose. And if art would have a purpose nowadays, maybe it could be very useful to fight against all these narratives that are constantly being bombarded at us through social media, through everything is always bombarding us with content and conversations and putting ideas in our head. And it's always constantly feeding, but no one is really contrasting all of this content. There is no alternative in the content. It is what you get, and there's no one really doing something outside that doesn't have like another intention, or a secondary, or like a profound intention to sell or to promote something, or to spread fake news or what, or spread an idea. But everybody has an agenda somehow,
Mm.
or something they want to achieve by doing that content. And there is no contrast to that.
Yeah. Interesting. I think that art, it makes me think of this. There was a platform which closed down. It was called Elo or Elo. I don't know how to pronounce that. ELO. I always pronounce it at Elo. And it was a platform that promised at the beginning to be advertisement free and not using not sharing your data, etc. But it became this artist platform because because it failed a little bit, it becomes sort of an alternative to Facebook. But artists found their home there, so they started to basically putting their paintings there. I posted paintings and photographs and the stuff I did on it, and it was sort of like like it was just artists, and which made it really nice because you could be inspired by others and et cetera, et cetera. And you weren't kind of, to your point, first of all, you didn't have the feeling like you're giving away all your stuff to this corporation that you don't really trust. And it was an environment where you felt sort of amongst peers, and I think all the other platforms feel more, I don't know, it's just there's no place for art in a way. Unfortunately they closed down, so it didn't work for them. They kind of ran out of money.
Yeah, nowadays artists do have to play the social media game. It's essential. They do have to have that nick, and it's contradictory most of the times, because usually artists are people who are retrieved in their studio, who might be more introverted. Not
Exactly.
everybody is like that, but the very nature of creating and having all of these ideas might push you a little bit away from society or isolate you a little bit. So it's a normal thing that happens with artists and some creatives. You get a little bit like pushed aside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think so. Yeah. So having sort of impact as artists, basically, because your art might, is sort of this sort of, it informs society. It kind of gives a different voice, or it gives comment on.
But the question is, should artists be the ones who should be doing this, or other people should be doing this for the artists? Because a lot of this work has fallen in our hands, no, as artists. The promotion, writing text, making explanation, all of these things that come parallel to the works that you do and the exhibitions that you have, it's a lot. And artists didn't used to have this responsibility before. So now it's much more than just having a craft or having a practice. Is playing that game and being successful at that game, which is the reputation game, which is the attention game, which is the whatever you want to call it, no? And if you don't play that game, it's very difficult for you. There is a percentage, and in this paper that I wrote that I'll share, I talk about some studies that define the conditions of success in art that has nothing to do with the practice itself, but it's just about a network of connections, essentially. And that's what they discover. And there's 2 studies about that I mentioned. There are different studies, but there is Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions on why eh, art becomes art in that sense, or what makes someone get to that point where they get these exhibitions. Another interesting finding would be, for example, that we don't celebrate young artists.
Mm.
You don't rarely see young artists being awarded in a major thing or being exhibited at museums. There always have to be either super
Yeah.
old or dead, no? And why do we attribute this condition to masters by age? Like, it takes time to master the craft, but really, young artists cannot be artists anymore because life has changed and the conditions of the world has changed. Before, you could live out of a part-time job in London and do art on the side and finance your art yourself. Yes, you lived in a very precarious situation probably, but you could do that. And I don't think today you can live out of a part-time job and then do art on the side. I don't think you can do half of the things that before you could do in terms of capacity or finances, but also with time and the requirements for you to be a person in this world, having a profile, having a social media and all of these things, so you in a way exist in the world. And for artists, that is very counterintuitive, because we're not supposed to be influencers. We're not supposed to have that influence, because when we are given the influence, then we lose the artist power, no?
Mm.
Yeah.
There's a point in being a no one too. There's a value in being a no one.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Um, Interesting. I keep thinking of Andy Warhol in this conversation, this 15 minutes of fame, and how in his time, and talk about entertainment. I mean, he was an entertainer as well as an artist.
Artist or designer, this is a good one.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. So if you would have asked him,
Savvy businessman is what he was. Yeah.
yeah, at the same time,
A
yeah, but
true influencer.
and
Yeah.
a true influencer. So he was a great, yeah. So every time in this conversation, he pops up in my head, like, this is like, what would he have done now with social media being what it is now? Would he have survived? Could he
I
have
think he
been?
would thrive,
Yeah,
Yeah.
but then
right.
he might get canceled too.
Yeah, probably. But then that would have worked
He
for
would
him
be like,
really
I
well.
predicted this all along. I think, yeah, I
Yeah,
can see that.
yeah. So, are there any examples or people that you are inspired by? Who are the artists that you go like, oh, these are my.
I honestly wouldn't be able to say. I have a lot of different influences, but also it depends on the period of my life.
Mhm.
When I think about artists, a lot of what I enjoy the most is mainly like modern art, so from the vanguards. But of course, there's a lot of wonderful and amazing works made in the contemporary context. It's just you have to pick and choose a bit more, I guess. Um, but more than mentioning particular or names of artists, I would rather say that my major influence is not art. And perhaps that's why I struggle to connect with the art world a little bit. But I don't use art to inspire my art. I use the real world to inspire my art. I use other fictional worlds created. Maybe, yes, that's also art, we can say.
Mm.
But it's not necessarily, yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily look for inspiration within the arts. I look for inspiration elsewhere. Um, and yeah, that's what I would say. I would insist on that the most. I would guess. Um, but
I think that's good. I no, there was a photographer I spoke to quite a few years ago, and so one of my first jobs was being a photographer because I wanted to, because I didn't want to be my grandfather being a painter and artist, and my father was more like an amateur photographer, but very good at that, and anyway, so I was a photographer, and for a while, and I spoke to this photographer, and he said, um, um, you don't look. One of his advice to me was, don't look at other photographers' work. Don't look at the work. Just don't look at the work, because if you do, everything's done. You'll go like, oh, they're so much better, or oh, it's already done. It's like, and it will kind of, it will mess you up. Just do you, and don't look at the others, be inspired by other things, and right, and then you develop your own style. Just that will happen. And the other thing, another artist told me, which I also remembered, someone else, he was a painter, and he said, um, just keep doing you. Don't listen to anyone, because there's like, especially nowadays, with this kind of global kind of economy, this world where everything is connected, there is an audience for you. They will find you. You just have to keep going. There's so many people out there. There are billions. There is an audience for you. Don't listen to anyone. Just go do you. So those two are the two things I always like. I hear myself repeating to myself, like, don't listen to anyone. Don't
I
look
can
at.
put it like this, I can learn from other artists, but I not necessarily the inspiration, I find it somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah,
But you can learn a lot from
of course.
art.
Yeah,
And from
totally.
other artists, techniques, styles.
Yeah,
There is something to obviously of great value and whatnot, but when it comes to the things that I want to do, I never really look at, what other artworks have been done in this subject or in this medium. It's more about how can let's dive deep in the subject and find the perfect method form to deliver it somehow.
yeah. But it too, I think it's not just for art, it's also for design. And as a designer, I mean, for me, I don't, especially in the world of like service design and design thinking and all that, I never read any books about service design or design thinking. I like books about behavioral science, and or totally different things that are totally disconnected from what we call the bubble of service design, because everything is connected somehow. And you get inspired by so many things, and it's actually so much more interesting to be a little bit outside of the bubble looking in than being in the bubble, because then you don't see who you are, you don't understand where you are, you only see where you are when you're outside. You're like, this is where
Exactly,
I
it's
came
about
from.
perspective.
Yeah, and in a way, linking back also to obviously your where you're from, Mexico, and when before we started recording, you talked about going back to Mexico, and loving it more and more and more the more you go back. But I think it's also important, because if you don't, you think that you got to know Mexico a lot better by moving to London, by saying, hey, this is where I'm from, because you were like, huh. I think if you travel, you know way more about where you're from and the value of where you actually were raised, and right, so you see better where you are.
Exactly, where I'm from, Mexico, and then moving to London, it was a massive cultural shock for me. I had no idea. I thought I had it all together. I thought I had it nailed down. I was ready, had my windbreaker, my umbrella ready. And I thought I was going to come and take over the world. And of course not. And a lot of that played in the fact that I wasn't expecting it to be culturally so different in terms of how people relate to each other, how they behave with each other, and many other things, and how the weather is so influential, because I come from Mexico City, and particularly the city, it doesn't really have any seasons per se. Sometimes it's a bit colder, sometimes it's a bit warmer, but really you use almost like basically the same clothes all year. You throw a jacket on and that's it. So there's so many different things that I had no idea that I was going to experience, that I came here, and it was a huge shock, and I had to adjust a lot of things of the way that I am to properly exist in the UK. And yeah, there were a lot of misunderstandings, like, for example, me trying to be kind or trying to speak to people that I don't know and what not. And I realized over time that in England, people that are kind are seen as suspicious. There's something to be suspicious about if you're being too nice or smiley to me. Why are you smiling to me?
Yeah,
Why are
what do
you
you want from
talking
me?
to me? And it's something that it took me ages to realize. Like, I thought, I think that people don't like me, but I'm being super nice. And the nicest that I was, the more people disliked me because they thought I was not genuine. And it took a while for them to realize, no, she's like that with everyone, even with the security guy at the supermarket or whatnot. I have always been like this. And as in the same measurement as the choice that I made about my practice, I chose not to change myself too much and to keep on being myself, even if people misunderstand me a little bit. Obviously, there are some measurements of moderation and whatnot, but there is two personas, no? The persona that I am in Mexico is not necessarily the same persona that I am here, and probably in other contexts would be different too. So you do change a little bit of where you are and the experiences that you have.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, can imagine.
Yeah.
Same. I mean, Morgan, yeah, obviously you've experienced similar.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah. And I also wondered if it was a bit of a, were you in Mexico City, or were you like, because I come from like a smaller town in Ohio in the middle of the United States, right? We're not a big thriving city. So then when I moved to the big city and there's sidewalks, of course, I
There's
never had a
sidewalks.
before. And because of course, like as you're saying about the kindness, like I can definitely relate to that. In Ohio, in the town that I'm from, you'd say hello to everyone that you pass on the street. And when people just looked at me strange, I was like, oh, did I do something wrong? And but so do you think it's a big city thing, or do you think it's like a cultural
It's
thing?
an absolutely big city thing. People naturally get alienated. The more people there are in a space, the least you can make connection with all of them. So cities are natural alienators, I think, of people. So definitely the city plays a major role. I've been to other places in England and it's not like that. But
Okay,
of course, there is a part of it that culturally, the
definitely.
personality and the manners, the forms, the behaviors of a Mexican and the British are completely different, no? Um, and and despite the fact that the cities is culprit probably for the kindness part, we do have more tact with people. Like we even like touching people and things like that is very common in our culture. Like from hugs or just in the shoulder while you're speaking to someone or whatnot. Those kind of like little things that make you feel maybe more comfortable with someone, or to make someone more comfortable or be more inviting. In this context, in the British context, is the contrary. You make someone uncomfortable by doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there is a difference in culture for sure, but we have to, of course, put first and foremost the city phenomena that, of course, plays a big role in London.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, for
And Arna,
sure.
you also did you live abroad for a short while?
Yeah. In yeah,
And
in
did you
Norway.
did you live abroad long enough to experience that, or it was more just kind of like an exchange?
Yeah.
Oh, new atmosphere, and then you just came.
I noticed the cultural difference between Norwegians and the Dutch. Yeah, totally. Yeah,
Okay.
very,
Okay.
very different. Very different. I mean, yeah, Norwegians are
So Tiz, if you
very. Hmm?
sorry, my brain is just going everywhere.
Yeah,
Norwegian,
go.
what?
No. It's just that I mean, the Swedish people have a saying about the Norwegians that in Norway there's one mountain for each Norwegian, which is true, by the way. There's an equal amount of mountains as there are people, and so they're
Keep it
you
that
know.
way.
They're very nice.
So I never made any Norwegian friends. I met a lot of people from other countries. I made great friends with them,
Mhm.
but I made one Norwegian friend, by the way, one, because and once you get to become a friend, you're a friend forever and ever and ever. But it's very difficult to become. You'll always be the outsider. You'll always be the foreigner. You always be, even if you're from another valley, you're the person from that other valley. You'll never be, this sort of part of their group of
Sure.
insiders. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh,
Mm.
So Tiz, and I guess, well, yeah, I guess Tiz, if you were to move back to Mexico, what would be something from the British Tiz that you would bring back and incorporate into your personality?
That's a great question, and I'm definitely gonna ponder upon the answer much longer than now. But
Like, I
there's
don't
a lot of
know.
things that I find fascinating about the British, and here in London, there's a lot of social norms that are not written, that are not enforced, yet they're followed, and I think that is outstanding because Mexico has a level of chaos that I cannot even imagine something like that being possible. Like on the electric stairs, people push to one side or the other. Either they're standing or they're walking up. So they allow space for people who want to walk and move
Right.
faster to go. And that would never happen in Mexico. Never, for example. And it's a social norm. No
Yeah,
one
exactly.
said that that should happen. People just turn out
Yeah.
to be that way
Yeah, you stand
somehow.
on the right so people can pass on the left.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's few things are confusing in London. I'm there quite often, and on the sidewalk, because in the traffic they drive on the
On
left
the other
side,
side.
which
Mhm.
is the wrong side, obviously. But anyway, so they drive on the left side, and then but on the sidewalk, I never know, or because I'm like, then you do walk that way too, right? You pass each other. You know, if you have people coming towards you, they will walk on the left, but they don't always. So that's confusing me. But on the in the escalators, or when you go to the to the tube, to the metro
Mhm.
stations and stuff like that, you stand on the right, which is amazing. Yeah, the Dutch do that too, so I do kind of expect it a little bit, not as much as the British do, because they are more, they more rules. They they know, I don't know how they do that, but they exactly to your point, they have all these kind of yeah, these kind of things that you're like, that's really nice. They standing in line, and it's, yeah, it's
The
amazing.
collective understanding of things was what amazed me, no? Because it just happened. And in Mexico, things not just happen like that. Like people
Yeah,
don't get organized like that.
yeah, but you do
And
need some chaos to be creative, right? So I
yeah,
mean,
I thrive in the chaos, but it
exactly.
is, yeah, Mexico City is a bit too much.
I'd
Were you
love to go there.
practicing art in Mexico before you moved to London?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was with this Javier Gomez Soto, with this painter for many many years, going to his studio and learning techniques. Eventually, when I became a teenager, that's when I started exploring, and my curiosity got the better of me, and I needed to do other things. I needed to see what else I could potentially do, and that's when I started exploring a lot of mediums as well.
Mhm.
But by that time, I started functioning as an artist, quote unquote, and looking for exhibitions, looking for opportunities, and little things like that as a young adult. And I started having little moments in Mexico where I could show my work or collaborate with other people. So I was already doing that. And then I went to university, and when I graduated my BA, I continue doing art, and at some point I decided that, because I never studied art or anything like that other than just going to the studio with Javier. So I thought that maybe I wanted to explore that contemporary art, to explore what the artist knew, and then I did a master's in fine arts in Goldsmiths in London. So that's why I moved to the UK and to Europe as a whole, and I've been here ever since, and I've been practicing many different ways to do art. And there is a question sometimes if what I do is art, because I do raise that question sometimes, not only because it just doesn't get identified in what art is, like in the circles of art, it doesn't get identified as art. So the people who are in the art world don't see it as art sometimes, or don't consider it art, which obviously plays an important role because they are the ones who are defining what art is.
Mm.
But also because it just doesn't follow the normal roles. And for example, people in the art world, they hate to interact. No, they don't like interactive works too much. I had to learn that by force, because how can I even imagine that people don't like to interact? They just like to sit and watch, or be passive spectators. But funny enough, the interactive aspects of my work and the playful aspects of my work are very effective in connecting with people, but it's not effective at all in connecting with the people in the arts.
Yeah.
And it's a funny dichotomy. So sometimes I have had this conversation in my head many times, thinking, am I an artist? What I do is really art? I'm okay with the idea that it is not. Just to say that. I'm okay realizing years after that I am, in the end, not an artist, and what I'm doing is not art. To me, it's much more important to continue to do and to follow that intuition that I spoke about in the beginning, in the things that I do and what I live by every day, than defining myself as an artist.
Mm.
And sometimes I feel like it might even play against me to be an artist. No, defining something as art or as not art, when you do something with the intent of art, it makes it art. And that's really what it is. Unless someone else validates it, we can say there's two ways. So there's someone of a stake validates it as art and say, yes, this is art, and that's how it becomes art. Or you say, this is art. I'm going to do this, and this is going to be art. And that's how it is. So why a banana on the wall? When does a banana pasted on a wall becomes art, and when it's just trash? And it's all about a perception of saying, because I added this value of art, either as an artist, creator, or as an individual, you add this value and you say it's art, and then that's why it becomes that.
Mm-hmm.
For the better or for the worst, really. It can open conversations, but it also, in some way, it does loses respect, which is what has happened, I think, in the last decades with art, is that people stopped having an affection or a relationship with art because they stopped understanding it, because they're not speaking to the people anymore, or they're not, and somehow, because artists, they don't need to create things that speak to people, but somehow it's disconnected now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm
A
thinking
lot
about,
of food for thought, I would
Yeah,
say, but these
yeah.
are thoughts. No, there's no definition, and we can even go as far to say that art doesn't really exist. We
Yeah.
create it as humans. It's an human invention, and it's gonna be whatever we say it is. And if you think about the performance measurements, you're never gonna find one single minimal performance measurement, other than someone saying that it's art of an institution that is validated. Other than that, there's nothing anymore. So really, it's an opportunity to redefine art if we take it, or we're just gonna let it just fade away somehow.
yeah, and I'm thinking, and Marcel Duchamp is one of my favorite artists, but he's famous for many things, but one of them being challenging like the old school notion of, and that was back when they would have these grand art fairs and say, oh, this is a piece of art because they meet XYZ criteria. And they got fed up with it. And Marcel Duchamp was one of the people like on the scene that kind of pushed back and said, well, who gets to decide what is art and what is not art? And then,
Yeah.
of course, that's why we now have urinals worth thousands and thousands and thousands of euros.
We could say that Duchamp is the beginning and the end of art
Yeah.
Yeah.
more than anything else,
I
because when
yeah.
he opened the door,
Yeah.
well, not him, no, but the movements that, especially the Dadaist movement, but other movements as well that were taking place in that area. At that moment, when they decided anything can be art,
Mhm.
and when they break all these parameters that people have been constructed, because this always happens, no? So this is art. This is how art it should be, and then it comes and breaks it and breaks it and breaks it. But what happens when you break it completely?
Mm.
There, the meaning and the purpose of art was dismantled completely a long time ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Either, and you might say rightly so. No, we needed to dismantle every definition of art throughout time to create the next thing. No, we need to be constantly dismantling it. But what happens when you put an end to that? Not when you go to the infinity on that's kind of what Duchamp did. He went to the thought in an infinitive way, and then you close down all the possibilities of perhaps what it could be. And
Mm.
then after that is the rise of contemporary art. conceptual art, all of these new versions of art that accept artists not having a technical skill, perhaps, or accept other forms of art, which brought us really interesting things, but also a little bit of a misunderstanding or a glitch in the system somehow. And we really haven't evolved too much from that current.
But you're a breaker, so this must be great for you.
And
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been trying to break it, but I am not really in the art sector, I would say. I am, and I have operated within there, but I have no stake on it, or and I feel like the revolution of art is not going to come within.
No, it comes from people like
that's
you.
That's what I was just thinking, because some of the work that I do is in like systemic design. So really looking at big systems and how they're all connected and everything. And to change one system to another, of course, Arna, you're also very familiar with this, right? Like it takes so much effort and so much work, and change is just uncomfortable and ugly, and you have to look at yourself in the mirror, and it's just not always the best of times. And so there's change through breaking. And so I even wrote down on my notes, like the art of breaking. Like there's something called engineering, and it's really looking at the art of ending things. Is fascinating, right? But then if you also have the art of breaking, and as you said, that is not going to come from within. So it almost has to be like an external disruptor or a new island that's built up out of nothing and says, hey, come join us on this island. We're going to
Well,
that's what I believe, because in my experience operating in the art world and the art industry throughout all these years, I don't see any intention of change at all. You would think, as I said before, like you think that it's a very liberal place where everybody's accepted, inclusive.
It
It's
felt like
not.
high
It's the
school.
contrary of that. No, it becomes something very restrictive and elitist and separatist and exclusive and whatnot. So there's a lot of things we really also need to question that. I sometimes also don't want to call myself an artist or where I do art, because I'm not sure if I want to be related to those values. Those are not the values that I stand by, and I don't think that's the meaning of art, but it cares about what my definition of art is. It's mine, and that's great, but the rest of the world doesn't care, right? So if that's what art means to everybody else, or that's what people think about art and artists in the rest of the world, then I am not sure if that's what I want to be associated with, neither.
If we made you the mayor of New Art Island, how would you define art?
Oh,
easy question.
I might just kill it as a concept.
Ooh.
I don't know. It's an interesting question, but I feel like it carries so much negative things. Even if you think about it back in history, of course, the modernists and the vanguards that broke everything, and was an amazing time in arts, but it has always been related to patronage. It has always been related with the powers, with aristocracy, with this merit of, oh, I'm a genius, so I can do whatever I want or behave whatever I want. The secretism. There's a few things that I'm not sure if maybe an approach would be different in terms of thinking more about makers and creatives and labels like that, rather than saying artists, that who the hell knows what that means. But it's, I feel like there will be an opportunity. Like if you think about in a science fiction point of view, and let's say that the technological revolution succeeds and we fix all our problems, and the promise of our utopia is coming, and then everything is automated and run by robots. So we all have all this free time to create and think and do things, for example. And that could be an interesting version of the future that I could potentially imagine if we allow that to happen somehow, in some way. We would spend most of our time creating and making information and whatnot. So that would probably be amazing, no? And we could redefine what that means at that time. Yes. Because I do feel like there's people that are more of an artist that are not artists at all. Like, for example, Michelangelo or whoever, no? That artists that I go and see that are selling for millions in the art fair. You see them on the streets, you see them everywhere, or you see someone like an artist that could be a designer, could be an artist, who knows, but he does really nice illustrations, and the illustrations become viral, and he becomes famous and makes something out of it, no? And is that really what the future could be of art? We have to first define, like, everybody thinks that art has an important place in society. Everybody thinks that cultural makers have a very important place in society and a function, and it's very important for us to exist and create our society. But no one also has the idea that then, because of that, we have to support the people who create those works. No one feels like they have that responsibility to take care of the creatives and the makers, but everybody expects that to exist in their society, almost like as a free thing. You have the idea that culture should be, and it's always free, and it should be, yes, but then that creates a very precarious situation for artists. And at the moment, right now, I don't really see how young artists will be able to survive. Many of my friends that I did a master's degree with, they have left the arts. They can, either because they are fed up with the system or how it works, or because they just need to live and work to live, and they have to just leave it on the side or leave it forever, no? And it's happening a lot, that people are no longer able to continue, or they are not able to continue for many years, because how can you live in those conditions, and where does it end? So there might be a deficit in artists in the future. And maybe even creatives as a whole, because we don't really have that much time anymore to make things.
Well, it depends a little bit on on what the future will bring. Nobody knows, obviously. I hope that technology will set us free, and we as society need to start creating a different relationship with jobs, and life in general, and that we take care of, because if technology takes over all the jobs, which it probably won't, but it will take over a lot of them, and it could. And if we as nations have enough resources to take care of people, and we start understanding that if people do not have jobs, they still have a meaningful contribution to society. You're not defined by work. You're not defined by job, as in because we live in those economies that kind of tells us that as a truth. If you don't have work, if you don't have a job, you're not really a worthwhile human being, really. Because and then we need to stimulate you to find a job, so we're not going to give you any, or we're going to give you not enough money to live, because otherwise you're just going to be lazy and watch Netflix all day. And people
That's what they say, but would you? Because how many days you can spend watching Netflix in your sofa?
I'll do it for a month and then I get bored. But seriously, of course not. People don't. We know this.
There's people that would, but I think the majority of people wouldn't, because people find things to do. They would do things in their community.
Yes.
They would do things, with others.
And they want to be meaningful. People want to be our social beings. They want to do social things. They want to connect to people. They want to be meaningful. They want to have a meaningful life. And watching Netflix all day might be meaningful for a while, but it's really not. So the point is that I think that if we build a society, a utopia, obviously, but still not, in utopian society where we in a way set us free, which has been happening throughout history anyway. We got more free time to go on vacations, to contemplate, to reflect on life, etc., etc. But if we can kind of distance ourselves from this idea that you need to work to be meaningful, that if you have, there's like an you know, there's like an income for everyone, so you can always live, and you will be meaningful, and you will create meaning for people. I think this is where we'll see a lot of new artists flourish all of a sudden, and not because they're going to be millionaires or billionaires because they made this art, because that's the other thing. The money part of it makes it so corrupt.
You got your necessities covered, and then you can create. No, so you cannot create when you're worried about how you're gonna pay the rent or what you're gonna eat. You need to have your needs met, and that's when you get creative. But there's also an opinion that would say that it's systemic for us not to have these spaces or to have the time and space to create and wander too much, because you say, yes, we have more time or we can go on vacations and whatnot, but really, where is our mind or our attention? And
sure, for sure, yeah, no, especially
it can be a threat to the structure, no? And when you think about, like, if I imagine this world, this utopia, I imagine that if it exists, it's going to come with a massive sacrifice from all of us. We're going to have to leave a lot of things that we love. We're going to have to completely change the way we behave every day and the things that we consume and how we live.
Yep.
And that could be tricky.
Well, for sure, tricky. Yeah, that's an understatement. It's going to be tricky.
So even I don't see
folks.
the utopia necessarily as a very positive thing, but maybe the utopia has to do with also like this sacrifice part of saying, like, no, we cannot have everything.
Yeah, but I think that's because that's sort of something we kind of tell ourselves. We lie to ourselves when we say we need everything. We don't need everything. We actually need not that much. We need not that much, really. Tiz, I love talking to you. I love this topic. As you can tell, because we've been talking for a very long time, and we want people to get also to reach the end of this podcast. And this is such an important and close to my heart topic, and I really like the way you're thinking about this. I think we need people like you to change that, whatever that is, what we call art, whatever that is. But we need people like you. We need it's going to be the outsiders, people outside of the bubble, and then we have to be aware that you don't become the bubble afterwards, like before you know it, because that
happens.
Well, yeah, it does. Yeah.
You're gonna see me in 20 years, selling my work for millions.
Exactly.
Being in all the fancy parties, and then you're gonna see me on the streets and say hello, and I'll be like, "Who are you?"
Who are you? You say, "I thought you were against this thing." And you're like, you don't know.
The future will tell.
The future will tell. I hope for you that some of that will become true, especially the parties and being able to live a wealthy and healthy life and with your art. So I think that'd be really cool. Anyway, so thank you so much for this conversation. Again, I could have talked to you way more. Yeah, thanks.
Yes, for inspiring us.
Thank you.
Yeah, my brain hurts now. I'm gonna lie awake at night and go like, we have to solve this. I don't know. Do we? No, we do not. Yes, we do.
Exactly. It's like, do we need to do anything?
No, we don't need to. Do I? Yeah, do I have to do something? No, I don't. No. Let it go. Let it go. Just do you. Exactly.
Thank you.